Now that we've seen how to handle exceptions, we're ready to move into text file processing. And we're going to start out in this lesson by learning how to write data to a file. First thing we need to do is have the right classes included into our program. So we're going to import 3 new classes that we've never used before. And they are the file-writer class. Notice that it's java.io.filewriter. The Printwriter class. And then finally, a class called IOException. We're going to use that to handle exceptions when they're thrown. And speaking of throwing exceptions, the next modification we have to make to a normal program is we have to add the line or the expression throws IOException to the end of public static void main. The compiler is looking for that to know that if a problem crops up in our file handling, that it can handle an exception of type IOException if it's thrown. So the compiler is looking for this phrase at the end of public static void main. With that in mind, we're ready to see how to write data to a file. First thing we need is the name of a file. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a file called grades.txt. And we're going to store it in the same directory where our program is. And we do that by providing just the name of the file by itself. And the compiler will assume that without a path, like C:\data/ whatever, then it's going to create that file in the same directory that the program is in. And for now, we'll work with that, and that'll be fine. We'll see how to change that later. The next step is to create an object that we associate with the file that we're going to write to. And that's a Printwriter object. So we start with the keyword Printwriter, then the name of our output file object, which I call outFile. And then we write new Printwriter to call the constructor. Then we have to call another class constructor FileWriter with the file name. So let's go over that line again. Printwriter is the class that allows us to write data to a file. OutFile is the output file object that we're creating. In other words, we're associating OutFile with the file grades.txt. Then we call the constructor for Printwriter with the name of a file that is opened for output. That's what the FileWriter class does, is it opens a file for output so that we can output to it. Once we've done that, then we can simply call the print method to write data to the file. So what we're going to do in this first example is write out a couple of pieces of data, like so. Then when we're finished, we have to close the file. By closing the file, we actually are closing what's called a print buffer, and that buffer is where the data is written until the close method is called. At that point, the buffer is, as the saying goes, flushed, and all the data that's stored in the buffer is written to the file, and then the file is closed. So we can take a look and see how this program works by saving it, and then compiling the program. This is chap 17 part 2.java. Then we can run it. We won't see much output, but then we can type the file, and there are 2 pieces of data, 85 and 77. I can also do a directory to verify that the file exists, and it does. If we had wanted to write each piece of data on a separate line, then we would have called the printLine method instead of print. Notice that these are the same methods that we use with system.out. One of the nice things about object-oriented programming is that we can reuse method names. And so once we get comfortable with a method name for printing, either to the console or to a file, then we can use it all the time in that context or in the appropriate context. So let's save this program and then recompile and run. And then let's display our output. So now you see that 85 and 77 are written on separate lines. That's the basics of writing data to a file. We need to import 3 classes, FileWriter, Printwriter, and IOException. We need to add the phrase throws IOException to the end of our public static void main. We create a file name. We create an output file object that associates with the file name that we created. We write our data to the file, and then we close the file so that the buffer is written out and the data is written to the file. One thing you may have noticed is that I didn't use try-catch in this particular program, and I won't for a little while longer so that we can concentrate on the techniques of reading and writing data to files. And then towards the end of the chapter, I'll get try-catch back into the program so we can see how to handle exceptions when they occur. So that wraps up this lesson on writing to a file, and now we're going to go to the next task, which is reading data from a file.